Tonight at 10, Donald Trump at loggerheads with US intelligence officials over allegations of Russian cyber hacking. Earlier today, the president-elect met with intelligence chiefs. He claimed there was no evidence that Russia had affected the result of the presidential election. But tonight, the intelligence agency stated with high confidence that the Russians had tried to boost the Trump campaign and discredit Clinton's. We'll have the latest from Washington just 2 weeks before Mr. Trump takes office. Also tonight, in Florida, a gun attack at a busy airport leaves 5 people dead and several injured. The Shropshire man who's terminally ill and the latest legal challenge for the right to die.
It's my body. I have a right to die. I have a right to determine how I should die. And more importantly, when I should die.
A visit to China's most polluted city as the country struggles with the worst winter smog of recent years. And Chris Froome talks to us about the damage done to cycling by allegations of doping and misconduct.
In the south, more laser incidents over Southampton Airport. Pilots say pointing them at planes is like using them as weapons. And after a colourful life, we hear the words of wisdom from Britain's oldest man.
Good evening. President Putin did try to boost Donald Trump's campaign for the presidency, according to a report published tonight by US intelligence officials. The report was released shortly after intelligence chiefs had briefed Mr. Trump on their findings. The president-elect insisted that any cyber espionage by Russia or China or anyone else had not influenced the result of the contest. But he's now ordered a plan to be delivered within 90 days of taking office on developing an aggressive response to any cyber attacks, as our correspondent Nick Bryant tells us.
American intelligence tonight released its explosive report, claiming that Vladimir Putin personally ordered what it called an influence campaign to help Donald Trump's chances of winning the presidency by denigrating Hillary Clinton and harming her electability. It concludes the Kremlin had a clear preference for the billionaire. Donald Trump today described the investigation as a political witch hunt by adversaries badly beaten in the election. He's rubbished the notion that he achieved a Kremlin-assisted victory. But US intelligence claims it wasn't just the billionaire who celebrated his unexpected success on election night. Intercepted conversations reportedly picked up senior figures in the Russian government rejoicing too, among them officials said to be aware of the alleged cyber campaign. At Trump Tower tonight, he was given a classified briefing by America's top intelligence officials who claim the Russians tried harder to hack computers at the Democratic National Committee than those at Republican headquarters, and that go-betweens allegedly delivered stolen emails to the WikiLeaks website to help him move from his penthouse in Manhattan to the White House.
Never before has a president-elect been so openly scornful of America's spies, also disparaging about their work. But the Trump team says he's right to be cautious, not least because the US intelligence community has got it wrong before over Iraq's weapons of mass destruction.
In a statement after the meeting, Mr. Trump said that Russia, China, other countries and outside groups are consistently trying to break through the cyber infrastructure of our governmental institutions and organizations, including the Democratic National Committee. But he added there was absolutely no effect on the outcome of the election. Tellingly, he didn't single out Russia for blame.
I think it will.
But Vice President Joe Biden has told him to accept the intelligence findings, pointing the finger at the Kremlin.
The idea that that you know more than the intelligence community knows. It's a little like saying, I know more about physics than my professor. I didn't read the book. I just know I know more. Grow up. Time to be an adult. You're president.
Relations between President Obama and President Putin have had a Cold War chill, and Donald Trump has signaled warmer ties. Speaking to the BBC today, the outgoing Secretary of State, John Kerry, delivered this advice.
I would encourage him to engage with Russia and to try to find that common ground, but not at the expense of rolling over and losing the values or principles or interests that we need to protect as we do so.
Donald Trump tonight expressed tremendous respect for America's spies, but he still clearly believes the allegations of a Kremlin conspiracy are being used to delegitimize his presidency.
Now, one of the most noticeable trends in American politics over the past 25 years has been partisan attempts to delegitimize American presidents. With Bill Clinton, it was over the personal scandal seized upon by Republicans to impeach him. With George W. Bush, it was the contested 2000 election, the Florida recount, and the fact that a conservative-leaning Supreme Court intervened in his favor. With Barack Obama, it was the campaign, the birther movement led by Donald Trump that claimed he wasn't even a US citizen. And political opponents of Donald Trump are going to seize on this report and say that it creates a big question mark over the validity of his electoral victory, even though the intelligence community has made no assessment over whether votes were changed or opinions were altered.
Nick, thanks very much. Nick Bryant there with the latest for us in New York, and watching that with me, our security correspondent Gordon Carrera. You've had time to have a closer look at these findings, Gordon. What do they tell us?
Well, I think the most significant line of the whole report is the first. We assess with high confidence that Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered a campaign to influence the election. Not Russian hackers, not officials in the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin himself. And what you get in the report then is a story of how American intelligence believe he did that. How at one point when they thought Hillary Clinton might win, they sought to delegitimize the whole process. At another point, they sought to support Trump and denigrate Hillary Clinton, and did that through propaganda as well as cyber attacks. Now, as a whole, is it plausible? Yes. Is it convincing? Well, I'm not sure it will be to skeptics, because actually what you don't get in the report is the hard evidence. That is undoubtedly secret material which the intelligence community might have, but which isn't in the report. For instance, there's no technical details of the hacking. One thing which isn't in the report, but which I've been told actually on the, incidentally, is that British intelligence, GCHQ, was actually the first to spot the significant breach into the Democratic Party and reported it to its American counterparts. But that's not in the report. So where are we left at the end of today? Well, we've had this clash between a president who's worried about his legitimacy and an intelligence community worried about its credibility. They've both set out their stalls today, but I don't think it's a clash that either side are actually going to win. In a sense, both will come out damaged. America will still come out divided, and I think the only people who might be left smiling are America's adversaries, people like, if you believe this report, Vladimir Putin.
Gordon, again, thanks very much. Gordon Carrera there, our security correspondent. Now, at least 5 people have been killed and 8 injured after a gunman opened fire at Fort Lauderdale International Airport in Florida. The man who's in custody now is said to have taken the gun out of a bag that he had checked in and opened fire in a baggage area. Passengers ran onto the tarmac outside when they're currently being held there while the police search the building. Our North America correspondent James Cook has the latest for us.
A mundane task at a busy airport has turned into a scene of horror. Passengers who seconds earlier were collecting their bags now cower on the ground. Some appear stunned, others were dead or dying. Survivors say there were desperate attempts to save lives.
We heard the noise. We thought it was firecrackers that wise kids were doing. And then we looked again because I know where it came in. And we looked again and we saw him with the gun going up and down.
Once he was done with ammunition out of the gun, he threw his gun down the road, which I was about 10 feet away from him. And he basically threw the gun on the ground, and he laid on the ground face down, spread eagle. So he was already down. He was waiting for the officer to approach him.
Take a look at this.
For hundreds of people who fled the airport, the terror was not over. Rumours of another gunman sent people running from the terminal. But they were just rumours, as the local sheriff eventually confirmed.
At this time, there has been no shooting at any place else but at the downstairs of Terminal 2. We have the shooter in custody. He's unharmed. No law enforcement fired any shots. The subject is being interviewed by a team of FBI agents and Broward Sheriff's Office homicide detectives.
The suspect is reported to have flown into Fort Lauderdale with a weapon checked into his luggage, apparently legally. A senior US politician said the man in custody was carrying a military ID card in the name of Esteban Santiago.
The shooter is in custody, according to TSA. So as we get the information, we'll pass it on to you.
As the airport is secured, the focus is already turning to the investigation. The gunman's motive is not yet clear, but terrorism has not been ruled out. In the United States, those phrases, these pictures, now have a terrible familiarity. James Cook, BBC News.
A man from Shropshire who's terminally ill with motor neuron disease has started a legal challenge to secure the right to be helped to die. Noel Conway claims that the law as it stands condemns people like him to unimaginable suffering. It's the first challenge of its kind since MPs rejected an attempt to change the law some 2 years ago, and it's being backed by the campaign group Dignity in Dying, as our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh explains.
My name is Noel Conway. I have motor neuron disease. It's incurable and terminal. I fear very soon I shall be entombed in my own body, and the thought of that fills me with absolute horror.
Got you lunch, love.
Oh, lovely.
Beans on toast as requested.
Day by day, Noel Conway is gradually losing all strength in his body. Increasingly, he relies on his wife, Carol. He's too weak to take his own life, so when his condition gets worse, he wants a doctor to be allowed to give him a lethal dose.
It's my body. I have a right to die. I have a right to determine how I should die, and more importantly, when I should die. And I want to do so when I have a degree of dignity remaining to me.
Noel often relies on a ventilator to help him breathe. He's registered with the Swiss suicide group Dignitas, but will soon be unable to travel. So he's challenging the law here.
Our current law condemns people like me to unimaginable suffering. I mean, I don't have acute pain. I'm just heading really on a slow, slippery slope to hell.
Noel was a keen walker, climber and skier. His family support his right to die, but don't want to play a part in his death.
It places me in an intolerable position. I can't help him to end his life. That would not be possible. I can't do that. I wouldn't want to do that. We need the assistance of professionals, of medical staff, to ease that passing.
The courts have shown leniency with relatives involved in assisting a suicide, but campaigners, most recently Tony Nicholson, have never been able to persuade judges that doctors should be allowed to end a life. This issue stirs huge passions, and when MPs last voted, they rejected a change in the law. So does that mean this latest High Court challenge is doomed to fail? While it is Parliament that makes the law, it is judges who interpret it. So when the case comes here, Noel Conway's legal team will seek a declaration that the current law is not compatible with his basic human rights to live and die with dignity. Under the 1961 Suicide Act, any doctor who helped end his life would face up to 14 years in prison. Baroness Jane Campbell has spinal muscular atrophy and has been close to death on several occasions. A disability rights campaigner, she says altering the law would send dangerous signals.
If the law were changed, it would feed into society's fear that to be severely disabled, to be trapped within your body, which I really practically am, is a state worse than death. It would be a huge burden to us. We already have to fight for the right to live. Please, don't help us for the right to die.
But that is exactly what Noel Conway wants. Canada and California have introduced assisted dying in the past year. Noel is determined it should happen here.
There we go. It's not a bad day, actually.
But knows he may run out of time before his case is settled. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Hundreds of people have attended the funeral in Huddersfield of Yasser Yaqub, who was shot dead by police on Monday on the M62 motorway. The inquest into his death was opened and adjourned today. The Independent Police Complaints Commission is continuing to investigate the shooting, as our correspondent Danny Savage now tells us.
Hundreds of people came to the funeral of Yasser Yaqub at a mosque in Huddersfield. Many didn't know him personally, but were here to support his family. His father, mother and sisters were deeply distressed. One family friend said they still need more detail about what happened to him.
As far as the gun culture is concerned and criminal activity is concerned, we strongly condemn that. But the question arises that the way this was carried out, in my opinion, it was totally out of order.
Investigators say they are working swiftly and keeping Mr. Yaqub's family up to date. But one key question about the shooting was answered today. The police have already said a gun was found in the white Audi Yasser Yaqub was shot in. We know he was the front seat passenger in the car. At the inquest into his death this morning, it was revealed the gun was found in the front passenger footwell of the vehicle, exactly where he was sitting. Yasser Yaqub was listed in court as being a 28-year-old office clerk. He was once accused and cleared of trying to murder 2 people and a firearms offence.
His family and friends, though, stress he was never convicted of anything. Meanwhile, a 30-year-old man arrested on Monday as part of the police operation here has appeared in court today, charged with possession of a gun, bullets and a silencer.
Moshin Amin from Dewsbury was remanded in custody after his hearing at Leeds Magistrates. Danny Savage, BBC News, West Yorkshire.
The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has suggested that if the UK were to stay in the European single market after leaving the EU, the question of Scottish independence could be put aside in the short term. Ms Sturgeon said she was seeking consensus and compromise, but that she was still committed to the goal of independence. Let's get more on this from our correspondent, Glenn Campbell, who's at the Scottish Parliament. Glenn, your thoughts on the First Minister's thinking in this offer?
Well, Hugh, Nicola Sturgeon still believes in Scottish independence, but what she's made clear today is that she would be prepared to park a second referendum for at least the next couple of years while Brexit is being negotiated, if Theresa May's government would accept her idea of a compromise deal. As Nicola Sturgeon set out last month, she's prepared to hold her nose and accept that leave will mean leave even for Remain voting Scotland, if the Scottish Parliament gets more power and if the UK government is prepared to seek to remain in the European single market or to seek a special deal that would allow Scotland to stay in. Now, the snag with all of this is that even though Theresa May says she will consider these proposals seriously, there's no great expectation that she will actually adopt them. And perhaps that's why Nicola Sturgeon has taken to social media to say that right now she still thinks another vote on independence is more likely than a soft Brexit.
Glenn, thanks very much for the update there at Holyrood. Glenn Campbell, our correspondent there. Now, more than half of all cities in China are experiencing high levels of air pollution, with some of the worst winter smog and clouds of recent years. Visibility in Beijing was reduced to less than 200 metres this week, and the effects of the increased use of coal and current weather conditions have left a smog cloud 2,000 miles long across northern and central China. The city with the worst air pollution is Shijiazhuang, from where our China correspondent John Sudworth has sent this report.
Somewhere underneath this murky gloom is a city of 10 million people. And for the unfortunate residents of Shijiazhuang, this is normal. For the past 30 days, the average air quality in this city has measured as hazardous on the official scale. You can smell, even taste the coal dust in the air, the grim, tangible reality of this country's model of economic growth. And people have no choice but to live, eat and sleep in this toxic smog 24 hours a day. It's like living under a cloud, this noodle seller tells me. The smog is harming my children's health. Of course I want to leave, this man says, but I can't afford to. And anyway, the whole country's polluted. It's not much of an exaggeration. 200 miles away, the pollution literally rolled into Beijing earlier this week and stayed. A toxic mix of coal dust from power stations and car exhaust. The smog now regularly blankets a huge swathe of northern China. And it's believed to cause more than 1 million premature deaths a year.
As a lung cancer doctor, I've seen an increase in patients in recent years, especially from heavily polluted areas. And when the smog gets worse, we see more kids with asthma.
Public concern has forced the Chinese government to begin investing heavily in renewable energy. Those working in the sector believe that China can clean up its air, just as wealthier, more developed economies once had to.
I'm pretty positive for China's future. Actually, we don't need that much time for the science research. We don't need that much time to develop relevant technologies. So I think a lot of things are more ripe for us to make faster solutions.
Those solutions can't come fast enough for this city. Fossil fuels may have lifted China's economy to ever greater heights, but they are poisoning its people. John Sudworth, BBC News, Shijiazhuang.
A cycle courier has won an employment rights case against the logistics firm CitySprint in a ruling that could have implications for many other workers. Maggie Dewhurst was classed as self-employed, but argued that she should be treated as a worker and given rights including holiday and sick pay. The company says it's disappointed by the outcome, as our industry correspondent John Moylan explains.
Maggie Dewhurst delivers medical supplies by bike to hospitals and labs. But despite being a CitySprint courier for the past 2 years, she doesn't have basic workers' rights. She's one of thousands of people in the so-called gig economy, characterised by temporary, insecure jobs. CitySprint say Maggie is an independent contractor. In other words, she's self-employed. But she believes her relationship with the firm is more like that between an employer and a worker.
We spent all day being told what to do, when to do it and how to do it. We're under their control. We're not a mosaic of small businesses, and I think that's why we deserve basic employment rights like the national minimum wage.
Today, an employment tribunal agreed. It found Maggie is a worker. It described her CitySprint contract as contorted, indecipherable and window dressing. Tonight, CitySprint said that it was disappointed, but that the judgment applies to a single individual and was not a test case. It added that the case demonstrated that there is still widespread confusion regarding this area of law. It's calling on the government to provide better support and help for businesses. But there are a number of legal challenges coming just around the corner, which threaten to shake up this part of the gig economy. As well as this case involving CitySprint, there are tribunal cases pending involving Addison Lee, eCourier and XL. Now, some say if the firms lose these challenges, it could fundamentally undermine their business models.
Within the courier industry, this is very important. But looking further afield, it's important to any business that uses self-employed people as their main business model. And that they'll have to be looking at, well, actually, can we justify this? Are they genuinely self-employed? Or is there a risk that they will be found to be our workers too?
Maggie's case mirrors a similar judgment against the cab-hailing firm Uber last year. An independent review of modern employment practices commissioned by the government is due to report in the spring. John Moylan, BBC News.
The cyclist Chris Froome, three-time winner of the Tour de France, has told the BBC that allegations of doping have been bad for cycling and bad for sport. He's also said that he turned down the chance to receive a drug for medical purposes back in 2015 because of moral concerns. He's been speaking to our sports correspondent Natalie Perks in Monaco.
Olympic bronze and his third Tour de France victory in 4 years. 2016 might have been a year to forget for some, but not for Chris Froome. But whilst British cycling enjoys a golden age, off the road and track it's mired in controversy, with doping's blurred lines at the heart of it. A TUE, or therapeutic use exemption, allows athletes to take a banned substance for genuine medical reasons. The issue is whether some have exploited the system for competitive gain.
Just the fact that we're having that debate about authenticity of TUEs, I think there's a problem with the system. I think WADA, the anti-doping authorities, need to tighten their regulations around TUEs so that they're not something that we question.
In those leaks by Russian hackers, it was revealed that Froome's former teammate Sir Bradley Wiggins had received 3 TUE injections before 3 major races in the space of 3 years. It's perfectly legal, but Froome revealed to me he refused one in 2015 on moral grounds.
I didn't feel as if having a TUE in the last week of the Tour de France was something I was prepared to. Just didn't sit well morally with me that was something I was going to do.
Do you think, therefore, it's right that we're asking questions of, for example, why Bradley Wiggins had 3 corticosteroids in the lead up to big races?
Sure, I mean, I think it's only healthy to ask those questions.
Froome's team, Team Sky, is currently the subject of a UK anti-doping investigation over an incident involving a mystery package delivered to Wiggins in 2011. Both parties deny any wrongdoing.
I mean, it's not good for sport in general, the fact that we're discussing the validity of results, and as I said, that brings it back to the authorities and something that they hopefully need to tighten up on.
As he attempts to win his 4th Tour this summer, the doping questions will again come thick and fast. Froome's biggest desire is to leave a cycling legacy no one will be left doubting. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Monaco.
That's it. Just to let you know, Newsnight on BBC Two will be talking to the former US intelligence chief James Woolsey, who's just resigned from the Trump transition team. That's on BBC Two. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.